talk about certainty a lot because I think it's such a important, significant, impactful, and at times dangerous concept when it comes to trying to think better. And I say that, there's kind of a logical flow or a logical chain that I've started to frame it in, which illustrates why it's so problematic for me, right? And it's relatively straightforward. The idea being, once you form or reach absolute certainty on a topic where you believe you know for certain your view is absolutely right, it's the truth, it's the right view, etc. Once you do that, almost by definition, you stop questioning. If you believe you are absolutely right and you have the absolute truth, it is now something that you no longer question, you no longer challenge, you don't think about anymore. There's nothing that could be introduced to you that would change your mind on this topic. Questioning stops. There's no reason to bring in new information. Well, once questioning stops, by definition, you lose objectivity. You can't be objective on a topic if you refuse to question it, if you refuse to entertain new information or refuse to entertain the possibility that you might be wrong because you have absolute certainty. Well, once you lose objectivity, then in my mind, almost by definition, you lose certainty. Because how could you be certain on something if you're not objective? If you're biased on that topic, how would you ever know if you were wrong? What would it look like? It wouldn't. You would never know because you've made up your mind. You've predetermined that you're absolutely certain about this topic, this belief, this view, and you stopped questioning, and therefore you're no longer objective, and you would never know. You would never be able to identify what it would look like if somehow you went astray. Your logic went off course, you missed something, you had a blind spot, something led you to interpret certain information the wrong way. You wouldn't know. And if you don't know, right, if you couldn't know if you were wrong, well, then how could you possibly be certain? Again, almost by definition, it cannot work. There's a logical loop there, almost a chain that just does not work, almost like math, right? It's trying to say 2 + 2 = 5. It never equals 5, ever. And again, if you are certain, almost by definition, you follow that chain, you come around, not questioning, lose objectivity, you can't really be sure if you're wrong, well, then you cannot be certain. 2 + 2 can never equal 5. And that's something that I struggle with a bit in the sense of, that's such a, I guess in some ways, that feels so certain to me, that rule, that the parallel being 2 + 2 obviously equals 4, it can't equal 5, and certainty can never lead to certainty. So I guess in practicing what I preach, I'm questioning it. Even though it seems so right to me, it seems so obvious, so logical, I understand the trap, so I don't want to be certain in it. So what do? I try and understand the views of others, truly understand, not to judge, not to try and prove wrong, but to just understand, to see what's underneath it. Am I missing something? Is there something in this logical chain that I'm producing that is off? And that's why it seems so obviously true, but it's not. And the best theory I've started to come up with around it is that in situations in which people do that, right? And what do I mean by that? Situations where people conceptually understand the idea of that logical chain, that certainty almost always leads to uncertainty and doubt. It can't be how it seems. There's situations where people conceptually get that, but they still choose to be certain, which again gets to the point of I can't really fathom that. I can't understand how you would do that. But it's almost as if they say, I get what you're saying. I understand that I may be biased here and I couldn't identify it. So in theory, I should not be certain, but I am certain and I'm still sticking with it. And you might say, well, that's, it's based on emotion, they're being irrational. But as I always talk about, there's always a logic, right? Aside from a mental illness, I believe, a true deep mental illness, we do what we want to do. We act logically. There's a calculation being run. What I've started to think is that in this calculation, there's almost, I've talked about leap of faith logic, where people take a leap of faith and they kind of make that logical. So I think in that same realm, there's what I would call functional faith. Functional faith meaning you want to believe you are right. You want to be certain. You believe so deeply that the thing you believe in is true and good or right, whatever. And you recognize that you can't be certain of that, but you want to be because it feels so right to you. So you almost employ this functional faith, which says, well, if I'm doing my calculation and I'm trying to determine, am I right about this? How right am I? Without that functional faith, you would come out to a conclusion of, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I couldn't know for certain, right? How would I know for certain? So I just have to go with, I feel pretty good about it, but I still entertain the idea that it could be wrong. But then you introduce into the equation this functional faith, which says, hey, much like I would with religion or belief in God or other things like that, that can't be proven, that you can't show somebody direct evidence of necessarily, you say faith comes in. And you say almost by nature of it, you can't prove it, but by believing in it, by having faith in it that it's true, it makes it true. That's the way it has to work. So you bring in this functional faith to say, in this situation, I'm going to treat this as a faith-based situation, where it almost overrides the laws of traditional logic and says, based on this faith that I have, that can give me the certainty that I need to believe that my argument is right and absolutely true. I'm not sure what I do with that, to be honest. And I say that genuinely. I don't want to jump to conclusions about it. I don't want to assume that's wrong, right? The gut reaction, the visceral reaction is to say, but in my mind, logic is a universal principle. You can't override that with faith, right? I get it, and that's, I guess, why I call it functional faith, because you're doing it for an intended reason. So I understand the logic of why you are doing it, but that doesn't mean that it meets a true logical definition that you can do it or you should do it. So I struggle with it still, but I am not, as I mentioned, I do not want to fall victim to the issue that I call out here. So I can't say with any certainty that they're not right. Perhaps it's right. Perhaps there's certain topics, and we've talked about it before, slavery and the Holocaust and just different terrible things that have happened where you look back on it and there appears to be a clear objective right and wrong. And at that time, perhaps there were certain individuals who, because it was in the time, they weren't sure. Maybe slavery is right. Maybe there is something to the fact that races are different, and it's just we've done it for so long. And there's this sense of, how could I say that this isn't right, right? And you just take a functional faith and you say, I just know in every fiber of my being that this is it's wrong. I know it's the way it's been. I know they've done it for XYZ reasons or however many years, but it's wrong. I just know it's wrong in my bones. And you take less extreme examples even, and you might, see something similar, a certain politician or a certain individual or policy, whatever it is that you feel like, hey, I get it. I know in theory I shouldn't be so certain, but I just feel it so deeply that it's wrong, that I take on this functional faith and I am going to act in certainty. So perhaps there's logic in that. What I'll end on is I wonder what the productiveness of that is, what the effectiveness of that is. Does it benefit you to employ that functional faith? I get it. It allows you to believe it with absolute certainty. It allows you to dig in and feel like I know I'm on the side of right here. But does it lead to a better outcome? That's still an open question for me.